Well, welcome to everyone. I'm going to kind of share my screen here in order to get started, and I'll show you what the agenda is for tonight. And let's see here. Oh, there we go. This is our agenda for tonight. We'll do a little bit of talking about how we're setting the stage for this meeting. And then we're going to have some time for Jeff to, as a homeowner, to introduce himself and talk about his own experience with solar. And then we'll have Rafson come on and as the contractor and give you some background from the business and technical end of things. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about how the group buy discount works. We'll talk about what next steps if you want to take action based on what you're hearing tonight. And then we hope to have a good amount of time at the end for questions and answers. So just to let you know, SolarUp is a group that kind of grew out experience in Holland. Many of us been part of a group in Holland called the Holland Climate Collaborative. And that was a group of folks who lobbied city council to come up with a community energy plan. We're very concerned about what climate science is telling us. And we're trying to find ways in which we can urge folks to move on from policy to actually taking action. And so that is kind of our reason for being engaged in this kind of a process. We know that every time another solar panel goes up, the amount of carbon pollution that goes into the air is being minimized. Okay. So basically, we view our position at SolarUp as a catalyst. We're not a contractor. We aren't an agency of government. We're folks like you from your neighbors who are concerned about climate and want to do something about it. And we realize that there are a lot of other people out there who are interested in solar for their own rooftop, but haven't quite figured out how to get all the pieces together. So that's the role we're trying to play. How do we get folks who are interested in solar together with the people who can answer all their questions that then makes them comfortable in moving forward? The good news for all of us is that this is really a good time to be thinking about solar. If you look at the graph there from 2010 to 2020, the production of solar panels has gone way up and the price of panels has gone way down. Combined with incentives the government is offering, this really is a good time to be thinking about it. So Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you as a homeowner. Jeff has panels on his own home, and he has actually lived through the whole experience of what it takes to think about panels, to research panels, to getting them installed. And they've been up on his roof long enough, he can actually tell you how does it really work out. So Jeff, take it away.
All right, thanks, Peter. Yeah, so I want to talk just a little bit about kind of residential solar and how it worked for us. I think the biggest thing to start off with is when we were first looking at solar, didn't even know who to talk to or what to do. So had started doing some research on my own, and there's lots of information out there, but not having a lot of direction. So until I actually made that connection with Rob and Chart House Energy, it was a big unknown. The other thing that we were looking at with our house, so it's an older house built approximately 1888. So had done some already energy efficiencies on the house. Kind of what was that next step? We also wanted to make sure that we preserved kind of the historical character of the house because we are on a major road within Montague. And so just trying to integrate all of those items together. Peter, if you want to flip to the next slide. So here's our house. And interesting because when talking about solar, you always, hear about south-facing roof lines. That was a concern, when I was first looking at this, because our house, the way it sits, actually, it's kind of offset. It sits more southeast, northeast orientation. But in working with Rob, we were able to look at two different surfaces. So we have not only panels on the front part of our house, so the one in the top corner, actually both of those are facing Old Channel Trail, which is more of a southeast facing direction. And then Peter, I think if you flip to the next one, and then on the southwest side is another set of panels. So we capture the entire day's sun by having two separate sets of panels rather than having all panels on one single south-facing side of the house. You can see even on kind of a historic house, they blend in with what we have going on there. Even the electrical kind of coming down from the roof line on the far left there is just tucked in along the roof and then comes down on one of the trim boards there. If you want to go to the next slide, Peter. The other part of kind of this whole system is, yeah, that's what everybody sees, but then what's also inside the house. So this is the layout of our basement. So a little bit better than the standard Michigan basement, but not much better. Already had the panel in place. And so on the right-hand side, and Rob might end up correcting me, is the inverter that's there. On the left-hand side, I jokingly call it the brain of the entire system. So this helps integrate everything that's happening within the electrical panel itself. And then if you go to the next slide, Peter, we also decided to do a battery system as part of this, the solar array. And really for two reasons. For us, because providing kind of battery backup power if power goes out, but also in doing that research, I was had recognized that those off times when the sun's not out, how do you power your house? So looked at doing a battery to power at least on kind of those shoulder times of the day when the sun is going down. During this process, we started off looking at a 10 kilowatt battery and we upgraded to a 16 kilowatt battery. And so I'll kind of, some of the next slides here, I'll kind of talk about kind of how that builds then the data and also the cost savings moving forward. Next slide, Peter. One of the things that's always talked about that I hear the question a lot about is that the safety of the panels itself. So this is the main breaker for that entire system. So if there's ever an issue that the fire department, anybody can actually turn off the power coming from the panels. And you can see the sticker on there, main photovoltaic system disconnect. So there's an entire separate disconnect that sits outside the house for safety reasons. Next slide, Peter. One of the things that I have really got into is the tracking of the solar. Our inverters through Solar Edge, and so there's I think a lot of them have this, but an entire program that comes with it. You can personally track your energy production and usage. So this was taken just a couple days ago, a sunny day. You can see that it shows during that single period of time how much power is coming into or being produced by the panels, how much is being used by the house, how much is being exported to the grid. And then on the bottom, you can see where is the overall battery as far as being charged. So 99% charged. So that's kind of all displayed left-hand side. On the right-hand side, then you can see real simply what's the system production and then what's the consumption for that when you're looking at it. So you can see those very simply. Rob, did you have a?
Yeah, just one comment. Where it says 3.29 kilowatts, that is the power that's going into the house and being consumed. And that offsets about 19 cents a kilowatt hour. And the power that's going out is 1.49 kilowatts. And that's the power you're selling to consumers. And that's at about 11 cents. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's important to see that so you can understand that, sometimes people ask, can we have 100% of my annual power? Well, that may not be the best choice it may be the best choice for the environment, but it might not be the best choice for your pocketbook.
Right, thanks, Rob. Peter, next slide. This is so one of those kind of things you can scroll through is it kind of compiles everything onto one screen. You can see solar production, consumption is in the red and also then falls into the background, and then self-consumption. So purple is when the panels are producing energy, what we're actually using in the house. So kind of Rob just mentioned that what was headed to the left was that 3.29. So what's being used as it's being produced, and then in the green is basically extra production from the solar panels being exported then to the grid. Next slide, Peter. The cool thing with this program is then you can also kind of keep breaking these apart to take a look at them differently. So that's that same one, but just broken up, and you can see consumption. So that's directly used from the grid. Self-consumption, so that's what the panels are producing and we're using at that specific time. Export is in the dark green on the right hand, and then solar production overall is kind of the light green in the background. Next slide, Peter. The other thing about this program is if you really kind of want to geek out, and I do every once in a while, is you can then look at the actual panels. So this is the orientation of the house, and then you can look at the production of those panels during a given time and see which ones are producing. Next slide. This is, I pulled up an older bill. So interestingly, these numbers are even going to be out of date because of the rate changes that Consumers has implemented. But I wanted to just show you how having that grid intertie and how it might look on your bill if you're a Consumers customer is that when you are overproducing, you have the self-generated outflow. So this was from July 2021. You can see during that period, there's a credit that gets applied to the bill, which then as you build that up, you can use it during the time of the year where you aren't producing as much. You keep drawing off that credit. And how that corresponds to then that graph is that's that green portion of the bill is what you are exporting to the grid. Next slide, Peter. And there's really two components, and Rob kind of mentioned this a little bit. So there's not only the savings on what you generate and push out to the grid, but also what you're saving by self-consuming. So the bottom part of that, the electrical charges, because those costs are much higher, anytime that you can use or produce and use that energy, you're saving immediately. The other part of that is then by having the battery is on that kind of bottom right-hand graph is one of the things you can do is where you would normally be pulling from the grid in those red zones is the battery can actually be supporting the house by pulling energy and using that. So you expand that area that you can actually store solar energy, then use it up through the night. Next slide, Peter. Another thing about the battery is so you can kind of regulate this. So we have different settings on the battery. So it automatically has a weather guard. So if there's a storm coming in, it saves more of the energy. So if the power goes out, you can utilize that. I also play with the settings if I know it's going to be sunny for a couple days. So I'll have it do a draw down to 15% so I can use more of that energy kind of in the evening and morning and really enhance those savings. Next slide, Peter. This is kind of a rough breakdown of cost for our systems. I rounded some numbers here. So our system costs approximately 22,000. It's a 5 kilowatt solar array, so it has 14 375 watt panels, a 6 kilowatt inverter. And you can see I put on there, we had the 10 kilowatt battery originally, and then we decided to upgrade to the 16 kilowatt. And then the normal different components there. At the time of our installation, it was in 2022, and the tax credits were slowly decreasing. At that point, it was at 26%. And I think right now it's back up to 30%. And even at 20%, 6%, you can see in a couple of next slides, it really made a lot of sense for us. So here's by the numbers is just roughly that 22,000. The tax credit brings the system price down to 16,280. Average savings to date, this is per year. Those pure bill credits, so what we're sending out to the grid, $256.14. Self-consumption savings, just under $700. And that's supposed to be battery off time. Sorry, my misspelling there. So what those periods where we're actually drawing from the battery on the shoulders of when the sun's not out, we're saving quite a bit of money by having that battery installed. So about $1,500 per year. So it works out to just a little bit less than 11 years for return on investment. That's if everything stayed the same. Does not include any annual rate increases that are happening. I just redid the calculation a couple of weeks ago. I think our return on investment is about 9 years now. The other thing that I found is that by playing with that battery, because I can play with the settings, I can really get some extra savings by kind of stretching that out. I think I might have one or two more slides, Peter. Nope.
That's it.
Okay. The last thing I'll say is, there was a lot of unknowns as we started this system or trying to figure out what was going on. I can't speak highly enough. Rob and Chart House Energy. Rob answered a ton of questions, really made it simple to kind of move forward with this. He still answers questions for me all the time as I try to, figure out different things. Really easy to do. And I would encourage anybody that's interested, looking at the numbers, the financial numbers make sense. It really works out well. So I guess I'll bump it to Rob. Your turn.
Thank you. Yeah, those are great explanations. So just quickly to show you, if you go to the next slide, I thought this was funny. This is, I saw this as a Australian solar developer came up with this one. Yeah, I thought that was great. Anyway, excellent. Price of electricity has gone up every year, at least for the last 20 years, probably more. Regardless of inflation, recessions, everything. Even when the price of natural gas went in half in 2008, when the fracking began, the price of electricity did not go down. So it's one of those things that you can expect that will continue. And in this last year, we saw a rather dramatic increase in rates because of the price of natural gas. And that is going to continue at least for the next few years. Right now, we're looking at around 19 cents a kilowatt hour. And now next slide. So just to quickly go through, how do you get electricity to your house? So you understand how this fits in the bigger picture. There's a power generating plant, and it produces power, but 80% of our power right now comes from big centralized generating facilities. And then it goes through transmission lines. Those are the big towers at very, very high voltages. And then it comes to your local area, and it goes through a substation down to the smaller lines that go down the street to a transformer on the pole and then to your home. The next slide. And so when you add solar, what you're doing is you're decreasing the amount of energy you're buying from the grid or need to get from the grid. You're not changing your house usage at all. That is up to you. In fact, there's been studies that people who add solar use more energy than they did before because they think, oh, now I have solar panels, it's free, so I can change my habits. Well, that's not something we recommend, but it happens. So in essence, you buy some solar panels and you use most of that energy in your home, whether or not you have energy storage. It's not necessary. It's okay, and yes, it becomes an additional component to the story. And so the gray arrows are during the evenings and non-sunny times, or when you're using more energy than the solar array is making. And then the blue arrows go out is when you sell power to the grid. Next slide. So I ran just some quick numbers, very similar to what Jeff had said. The price of panels had gone up a little bit and in the last year or two. There's been some shortages and stuff. So an average 5 kW system right now is about $21,000. There is a 30% tax credit that would go against your taxes. And if you don't use all of it, it rolls forward into your next year until you eventually use that up. So you end up with a net project cost, and right now we would expect you to see 12 years or so return on investment. So about an 8% return on your money. And as Jeff had indicated, I did not include in this calculation any increases in power rates, which we expect to see another 10 or 11% in this coming year. At least that's what consumers has asked for. And so the program offers discounts as if we get a bunch of homes, we can buy the equipment together, we can do the projects together, and it'll allow us to offer a discount, a lower price for construction. And this shows how if we get more adoption, we can end up improving the return on investment. Next slide. And sort of as I just took this as one example, this happens to be a commercial client, but it's kind of fun to see the prior year and the present year and how once we installed the solar, suddenly they were starting to see really dramatic savings. So next slide. And so this is an example. Jeff's, I didn't even think about it, but Jeff's is a great example of your local install. This one happens to be in Spring Lake. And very much like Jeff's, we put some panels on the other side of the garage and even some on the flat part of the house in back. Next slide. And Chart House is really predominantly a commercial industrial installer. What brought me to Muskegon is there was an incentive in 2008, it opened in 2009, and I built a system very much like this one on Torsen Marine in Muskegon. At the time, it was the largest solar PV project in Michigan, cost $1 million. And now that same system is only around, it's probably $320,000, and just 12 years later. So it's really dramatic. The decrease in costs, the decrease in, I mean, this becomes regular business for a lot of businesses, and our hope is that we get to expand the same adoption in homes. Next slide. But that's not all you should do. I just want to throw this in here that everybody should first do what energy efficiency measures you can first to reduce your energy costs. That's the low-hanging fruit. And then if you can go solar, go solar. If you can't, buy green energy there's a program from consumers where you can do that. And then I recommend buying an electric vehicle. It'll also help with the reduction in greenhouse gases. I own a Chevy Bolt. I love it. And then the last thing is to vote. It's the most effective way that we're going to see change in our country, to vote people in that will support sustainability measures. Next one. I think that's it. Oh, and I threw this one in there so that this was kind of funny, but I mean, it's amazing that California has already requires all new construction to include solar. So with that idea, we're starting, I mean, Germany has been there for years. There are a lot of other countries that are doing this. And I think that we'll see more adoption, possibly legislatively in this country, to get us off of fossil fuels. I think that's the end. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure that there'll be opportunities but you can always contact me at Rob@Charthouse Energy, and I'll be happy to get back to you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jeff and Rob. We would just like you to understand that there are options and incentives for you to move forward with potentially putting solar on your own roof. You've heard it from Jeff and Rob already. There is a 30% federal tax credit out there. If we get 10 individuals.
One thing to note on the 30%, just so everybody knows, you don't need to rush, though I think what he's about to say next is important, but that 30% is good for the next 10 years. So it's not, if you don't have the opportunity this moment, that incentive will continue for the next 10 years.
Okay, and Charthouse is willing to offer discounts up to 15%. As Rob indicated, this becomes a group buy event that allows economies of scale. So if we get 10 contracts or more, Charthouse is willing to reduce their price by 15%. 30 and 15 to me sounds like a pretty good value proposition. And then part of the question becomes, well, where does the money come from? And of course, that's traditional sources of banks and credit unions. And in the state of Michigan, there's an organization called Michigan Saves, which was launched by the legislature, that actually provides very affordable loans for energy efficiency measures. And that's a pretty strong opportunity also.
And they'll lend up to 100% of the project cost.
Yeah. So just to let you know, the discounts we're talking about is if coming out of this event, 3 persons do end up installing solar, Charthouse is willing to give a 5% discount. If that moves up to 7 contracts, that would be a 10% discount. And if we make it up to 10 or more, it would be a 15% discount. You're seeing there, we're holding the options here open until June 1st. We recognize that it takes some time for you to sort through your thoughts and make your plans. It takes some time for Rob to get an initial estimate put together and back to you. Take some time for you to say, well, how do I work out making this happen financially, or what are my issues? And it takes some time for Rob then to make a final fine tuning of that. I'm assuming, Rob, if they want to move forward after the initial, you'll do a site visit.
Yep.
Yeah. So just to make sure electric panel is appropriate, the roof is appropriate, trees are not too much, all those kind of issues that you want to know before you make a final decision. So it just takes time to process through all of that. And that's why we're saying this offer is being held open until June 1st. If you decide following this evening's presentation, you'd like to follow through and at least get an estimate, step one, email us here at solarup.org. We have told the contractor that for the initial step here will be his unpaid administrative assistant. Rather than their need to field a lot of phone calls, we'll take care of that here initially and then get a spreadsheet over to Rob that lists everyone who said, yes, I want to move forward, and get an estimate. What we will need from you would be your name, your address, your phone number, and a copy of your current electric bill. And Rob, do you want to say something about why you need an electric bill?
Oh, yeah. And on the electric bill, both the front and the back, on the front, it shows your usage throughout the year. And that allows us to know an estimate of how much is going to be offset by self-consumption and how much will be sold to the utility. So we can get you a really accurate or a pretty accurate estimate of your savings. On the bill also is your address, is the service address, and that allows us through Google Earth to look at the property and give an initial idea of what can fit. And then we'll confirm that when we come and visit, if what we've proposed is interesting.
Step two, we want you to understand that we think this is a significant amount of money to be investing, and we would encourage you to do your due diligence. You may want to get bids from other contractors just to know that the bid you're getting makes sense. That is fair to do. I would expect anybody who is thinking of spending $20,000 to kind of kick the tires and see what it looks like, from another offer, just to make sure everything is sort of in the same ballpark. The caveat there is when you do compare apples to apples, that the panels are actually the same, delivering the same kind of kilowattage and all that sort of thing. But I'm sure Rob would be happy to talk you through that.
Absolutely.
Okay, step number 3, we would encourage you after this meeting to recruit and refer your friends. Everyone, we're holding this offer open until June 1st. You didn't have to be here tonight in order to benefit from that. So if you have family members, neighbors, friends who are thinking they'd want to do it, ask them to send the information in also, because they would be also eligible for that discount. And the more people who are considering it, the more likely we all are to get that 15%, which quite frankly looks pretty good to me. Okay, so at this point, we'd like to just open it up for your questions. I know we've thrown a lot of information out there, but you've been able to hear from a homeowner who has worked his way through this process and can credibly tell you what really happens. Rob is here for all kinds of technical questions and procedural questions. So I'm going to stop the share.
Well, there was a question in the chat. I can answer that one first.
Yeah.
The question is, does it matter who your utility provider is? And the answer is yes and no. The answer mostly no. It doesn't matter. We can install in any utility area in the state. Some utilities, especially municipal utilities, have restrictions on system size and stuff like that. consumers is pretty open. I mean, they have thousands of solar systems installed by their customers, and they're very comfortable with it. Some of the smaller municipal utilities are less comfortable, but we can look at any one and we can provide the estimates based on whichever provider you have.
Margot, you have a question?
Yeah, that was, I think it was a
Do
question.
you have to have a new roof first?
We'd like to see a roof that has a decent length of life left in it. If it's in the first 10 years or so, I'd say you're totally fine. Other than that, we'll want to come out and do an inspection to see if we expect to see the life expectancy to be good. One thing to note is that the roof underneath the panels will last longer than the rest of the roof because there'll be no sunlight on it. And that's a consideration too.
iPad 2 has a question. I'm not sure what your name is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's Jim Loader. Yeah, I realized that I didn't put my name on it.
Get him out of here.
Yeah, my question has to do with the maintenance of these solar panels, and then how long do they last? Because, I've heard so many presentations about solar panels, and it's like an assumption they're supposed to last forever. I don't know anything that lasts forever. So talk a little bit about the maintenance and how long they last.
Well, solar panels are warranted right now for 25 years. That means that the manufacturers believe that they are going to last that long, and probably 40-50% more than that. The original panels that were built by Bell Labs in 1961 or 2, half of them are still operating. So I could say it's a very, very long time is the likely length of longevity of that. However, there are other equipment like the inverters that we expect to have a life expectancy of 12 to 15, maybe 20 years. And so sometime in that period of time, you'll have to replace the inverter. Typically, the inverter cost is about 1 year of savings. So whenever that event happens, you'll forego a year's worth of savings or a year and a half worth of savings. And that, in terms of maintenance, it's fairly small. We do provide operations and maintenance as a service. We can either come out when needed, or we can do it as a yearly contract. So it's a relatively small amount because we live in Michigan and we get 36 inches of rain, 37 inches of rain a year. So the dirt that gets on the panel washes off. We don't really expect much of any maintenance. We do include the first year of maintenance because we've found that almost all of the problems that we have within happen within the first year. So it's the wind blows, the rain comes in. If there's something that's going to go wrong, it'll go wrong soon. And so that is that we feel is part of construction. And so I hope does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just, do you know, like, does homeowners insurance cover the solar panels in case something does happen? Like,
Yes, we do recommend that you contact your insurance provider so that they know that new piece of equipment is installed on the building. So if something does go wrong, that you're covered.
Okay.
It's a very small additional expense. It's so common now that pretty much everybody, insurance providers understand that.
Yeah, Jim, and I can answer that directly. I talked not only with our provider, but a couple other ones. Our current policy, there was no change in the cost because of how we were already insured. The other part of that is the fear always is, well, you putting these on your or on your house, does it increase insurance from like fire hazard or any of that? It does not. So there's no additional cost associated. It's just value for replacement if something happens.
Thanks.
Margot, you have a question?
Yes, I do, and I apologize. We have two different setups, so there might be a little bit of an echo here. My question is that I have heard some providers will take themselves the savings. And so in other words, the savings you have each year from what the power company compensates you for, instead of reducing your electrical bill, is an offset for the cost of the panels, so you don't have to pay so much up front.
Right. There are some companies that provide a how do I put it? A basically a lease to purchase. And I found that a lot of them take the opportunity they will take the tax benefits, they will own the equipment, and all you're doing is leasing it until it comes back. Oftentimes, we found that the rate that they charge equals very close to all of the savings. So it's sort of like they're renting your roof for no use. I mean, it's fine, you can do it, but I think that there's better deals like this one. And Michigan Saves is a good financial institution. You might find that you can get a better rate from your regular bank. I would compare the two. We've worked with Michigan Saves for many years, and they're great to work with, and they lend for 7-10, and I think that they even go to 15-year lease financing.
Rob, would you share a little bit about what your process is? When somebody says, okay, I'd like an estimate, what are all the steps they could expect you to follow through in order to get something done?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Our first step is you provide us the electric bill. That provides us pretty much all the information we need to come up with a rough estimate. Then we'll send you that estimate and you review it. And if you're interested, then we'll come out and have a site visit with you, make sure that the roof is in good enough condition, that the structure of your roof is enough to support the solar panels, that your electrical system is enough to support the solar panels. And then we'll give you a finalized estimate. Once that finalized estimate, if you agree, then whether you go with Michigan Saves or another finance group or whatever, then we'll go to contract, and then after the financing comes in, then we'll get the permitting and come out and build, and then provide for you a operations and maintenance manual. So you have all the manuals for all the equipment that we've installed. And then if you want us to continue to do the O&M work, I mean, again, it's very small, and it's about the same if you decide to just call us when you need us. That's fine too.
Dave, you have a hand up?
Yeah, I did. I, I'm taking notes here, but, well, just to respond to the Michigan, saves.
Michigan saves, yeah.
So we did everything, our due diligence, we snugged up our house. You have local programs, you know, that Holland has a energy retrofit program, which we've done, and we've saved a lot of money by just snugging this mid-century modern house out. And we do have a new roof because we had one of our many trees around our house that fell on it. You know, one of the trees fell on the house, we have a new roof. So it's perfect for solar panels, but the problem is we have been rejected twice because we have too many trees. So, and we're not willing to take down trees to be able to have more solar because the trees offer a certain amount of shade, obviously, around the house itself. But I've asked this question before, and Rob, maybe you can answer this in terms of external, you know, can an external, I mean, other parts of our yard have lots of sun, and can they be mounted or remotely, you know, 20 yards away or something?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, we did a project in Grand Haven where we snugged the panels, the ground mount array right up to the fence. So it looked like they had a regular vertical fence with a diagonal fence in front of it. And so nobody even knew that it was there. And we can trench to the house and put them in other places. Ground mount is definitely a viable option for many people.
My other question is that aren't some municipalities, as Holland has done down here, offering, you know, basically all sorts of credits on appliances and that sort of thing? Are they offering any, you know, is that part of some of your, you know, a number of municipalities programs or not? I mean,
Absolutely not. There's no utility in the state that will support, will give money to, they think they're giving too much money for the outflow of energy. And in fact, Holland BPW is one of the worst in the state. So, but and that's again, it's important to right size the system for not only your home, but also for the utility that you're in, so that we make sure that the economics still stay very good.
Okay. Margot.
I'm still stuck on the roof business. If your roof is over 10 years old, but the part under the panels is protected, can they repair the rest of it? If you need to put another layer of shingles or something on the rest of it? I mean, what do people do if their roof is older?
Yeah, I mean, that is a challenge. If the roof is older, a lot of people will wait and do the install later. I really try to avoid putting solar on older roofs. We have done it though, because if you decide that you just have to have it and you want to put it on now, then sometime in the future, you'll know that there's going to be some maintenance that needs to be done, which means taking down the panels, taking down the racking, letting the roofers do their thing, and then putting it back up again. Now, the positive side is all the infrastructure is in place. So that removal and replacement will be less expensive than the project was at the beginning. But it definitely isn't gonna not help your return on investment. That's why we really recommend putting it on a roof that'll have a similar lifespan to the array.
I have another question too, and that is about evaluating your roof's appropriateness and the location of trees. We face south, but we have a lot of tall trees to our south that are sort of leafless half the year and leaf filled half the year. And do you make a house visit before the commitment happens?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is some really cool software that allows us to do, because now we have 3-dimensional images from Google Earth. And that allows us to get a first blush estimate. And there are homes that it just doesn't work. And as David had said, sometimes you can't put it on the home. Other times you can put it in the backyard or on the garage. Often garages are good locations too. So yeah, we'll try to work what we can, but we can't do everything. There was one question about, did I answer your question? I just wanted to go back.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Wanted to go to the chat. The presentation is going to be available. It's going to be on the YouTube, I think, so that other people can see it.
Yeah, we know that not everybody was able to be here tonight. I have correspondence from folks who signed up and then, life changed. So we are gonna send the recording out once we have it posted to YouTube.
Perfect. Mike?
Okay, Mike, you have a question?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. One is the expected life expectancy for the battery bank and what the replacement cost would be for that. And then the other question, I've got a house that's probably, borderline, but our house orients north-south. So we have a lot of trees east and west of us, but we have a backyard that's kind of open. So I'm wondering what the minimum exposure time would needed, like for a ground mount or something like that.
Yeah, typically we like to see at least 4 hours. So, 10 to 2 or 11 to 3 at a minimum. He's really at the edges of the hours. Ideally, you'd get 6 hours and you can sort of do that yourself, just looking out on a weekend and just sort of pay attention to how much is shaded at what, when it starts getting badly shaded in the morning and when it gets shaded again in the afternoon. What was the other question?
Oh, life expectancy for your battery bank and the replacement cost for that?
Yeah, battery banks, right now, they're warranted for 10 years. I'd expect the life expectancy to be more, especially that assumes that you're going for full self-consumption, which means that you fill up the battery during the day when the sun is out and you drain it almost all the way down in the evening every day for 10 years. And that's what LG and Panasonic and all the companies are doing. The life expectancy of a battery is at least 10 years. I think somewhat more because there'll be times of the year where you don't fully cycle it. I do think, however, in the next window, in the 3 to 5 year time frame, I understand that several car companies are coming out with the 1,000,000-mile battery, and that's next year, and they're going into testing now. I mean, it's all commercially made, but it hasn't hit the solar market yet, or energy storage market yet. I think it's going to be a few years before that production expands to the energy storage business. And then, so I think and that's a 35-year battery, to give you an idea. So basically far exceed the solar array's life, or I should say equal the array's life. And, in terms of cost for the battery, we're seeing the savings with the incentives making it about a 5-year return on investment. Meaning that the battery replacement's around 6 or 7 grand. And you're saving, so after the incentives, you're down to 5 grand or so. And so you're looking at, what Jeff was showing you is around $550 a year of savings. So his battery, at the way he's operating it right now, would be around a 10-year return on investment. I think a lot of them are running, if you run it full self-consumption, where you cycle it every day and take advantage of the day-night shift, I think you're going to be looking at something like a 5-year return on investment. So I don't, if you find some additional value of being uninterruptible, so you can literally weather a storm, if that's important to you, then that's the reason to do it, not the economics of adding a battery. I mean, there's lots of discussion and everything about that, but that's what, so my take is, if it's important to you, do it. If it's not, don't. And if you can, I think that the real energy storage of the future are car batteries. And that's where we're going to see E to H, which is energy to home, or E to G, energy to grid. So that's the thing that's happening right now. And we'll see bidirectional vehicles. I mean, the Lightning truck is already there, and many other vehicles are going to be out in the next year or two. So my feeling personally is that stationary batteries are good for really being uninterruptible and guaranteeing that your furnace is going to operate in the middle of the winter, but that the economics should be driven on electric vehicle energy storage.
Rob, do batteries require any maintenance on the part of a homeowner?
No, these are the ones that we install are lithium-ion batteries and are completely sealed. We don't even touch them. There's nothing to touch. They work or they don't work. And so it's not like the old days where you had a bunch of lead acid batteries and you had to fill them up and all of that. None of that's you can do that, but it's much more difficult actually these days to get the systems to do a lead acid battery storage.
Margot.
I wondered for Jeff, you said 22,000. Did that include your battery cost, or what proportion was your battery cost? And also, why did you decide to go with a bigger one? And so take that for now. I'll probably have other questions.
Yes, that included the battery. And in fact, when I was kind of working with Rob, the way I kind of figured it, the cost of that battery was about 25% of the cost, and I was going to get 26% back with the federal credit. So it was kind of like getting a free battery from my perspective, and having the benefits of both uninterruptible power and the ability to kind of work with that to get additional savings on the solar. So that included the battery at that time.
Rob, who's responsible for permits and interconnection with the utility and all of those sort of governmental permissions to move forward?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is an all-in thing. We do our own structural review, our own roof review. We will do the permits. We will do the interconnection and pay for both of those permits as part of the project cost. And yeah, it's all in. Everything is there's no additional work or cost outside of the project cost.
Rob, I have a question. You mentioned lightning. Is that like lightning e-motors?
No, Lightning Ford, their truck,
Okay. Yeah,
their
okay.
their truck is been marketed as a bi-directional. I don't know that they've got the bi-directional charging unit out yet, but I believe it's shipping soon.
Yeah, you do see that in their marketing and some of their commercials that they're powering things other than the truck itself. So they're already marketing that, or to a degree
Oh,
already.
yeah, they want to be able to back up the whole home. Now, the one
Right.
thing that they don't indicate that's important is that, and I think is one of their problems, is that you have to have an automatic transfer switch. You have to be able to turn off the house from the grid, because if you were running the house on your vehicle, all that energy would flow right out into the power lines, and
Yeah.
you'd end up with nothing in your home. So you need to be able to disconnect from the grid in an outage and then reestablish after. Either manual, you literally turn off the big breaker at the top of your panel and then turn on your car. That's the least expensive option, or you can have that automatically done when there's an outage.
We also, by the way, had a Volt. So you said you had a Volt?
Bolt, B-O-L-T.
Volt, okay. And we had a V Volt. So Don still has a Bolt, I think. He's muted right now, but good.
Rob, would you return to that finance kind of piece? You've seen a lot of projects. What sort of financing mechanisms do you typically see? Or what's the range of financial arrangements that people are making?
Yeah, there's really three groups. There's, for the larger scale stuff that we do, there's a power purchase agreement where the finance group owns the solar panels forever, and that they then sell the power to the host facility or home or whatever. That's less typical in residential, but very similar to that is the lease to purchase, where the finance company owns the equipment and you pay a lease payment, and when the lease is done, then you own the equipment. That I would be very careful on those, because typically they take all the profit, and so they make a profit building and then they make a profit financing you. Then the next group is either some people take a line of credit off their home equity line of credit, or they go with a financing group like Michigan Saves. What's cool about Michigan Saves is that the state established in 2008 a loan guarantee so that people could do energy efficiency and renewable energy on their homes or businesses, and you could borrow up to 100% of the project cost. And what's really cool is you can borrow the whole amount, and then when you use the tax credit to offset your tax bill, then you take the money that you would have paid the federal government and you write down you write the check to Michigan Saves, and they recalculate your payments so that it's a step down in payments. And that way you don't even need to come out of pocket for the 30%. So those are sort of the three sort of options. And if you did a line of credit, it would be identical. You could borrow 100% of the project cost, and then when you realize the tax benefits, you just write a check to the bank, and now the remaining amount of your payment goes way down. It goes down by the 30%. Now, everybody wants you to have that payment that you're making every month be less than the savings. You want more savings than the cost, and almost all of these will get you there. With a 10%, a 10-year return on investment, and with no increase, and the reality that the electric rates will increase, and that the cost of your financing won't. So you'll be saving money, increasing over time. And then once you pay it off, now all of the savings are yours.
Rob, I have a quick question. Were you able to answer? Jim Rose had a question about, does the 5 kilowatt example represent an average household consumption? Did you respond to that?
Sorry, I didn't say that. 5 is about right. I mean, there are plenty of homes that are bigger. I showed you that 17 kW system that we did in Spring Lake, and they have everything. They have a hot tub. They have, you name it, they got it. But that is a average home without an electric vehicle. So an electric vehicle will increase your energy usage by maybe a third. So you might have to go with an 8 kW system if you have an electric vehicle. So that's something to consider. But again, going back, first thing you do, change your light bulbs to LEDs. Look at any other kind of energy efficiency you can do. Do that first. Seal your windows, seal your doors, insulate, do all of those things first. Go to heat pumps. Now that may if you went from natural gas to a heat pump, well, you're going to have more electrical usage, less total energy used. So again, there is an example where you're going energy efficient, but you may have more electrical usage. So that's why you really want to think about what you're going to do with your home first, and then decide if you want to do solar.
Rob, can you talk about the automatic switching system?
Sure. It started with the generators, backup generators. They've been doing it for a very long time. When there's an outage, the switch automatically senses the outage on the utility side. It will automatically disconnect from the grid. In the case of having solar with a battery, it will also tell the battery, in the case of Jeff's case, it's all internal, it's all one. It will automatically say, okay, now start making power. And now you're feeding the home with your inverter and battery. And now it will continue to run that way throughout the outage. And then when it starts sensing that there's a utility out there and they're back again, it will wait for 5 minutes to make sure it's stable. And then it will tell the inverter saying, okay, we're going to switch over, turn off for a moment. It'll open the switch. The house will operate now on the grid, and the inverter, because it wants to be safe, it will soft start over a five minute period.
Is that extra cost?
It is. We include it all as part of the battery system.
Okay. You also talked about a bi-directional meter. Is that a different meter? Consumers is in the process of changing all of our meters from 3G to 5G.
That's only a communications thing, but
Correct.
You're right. When they went to smart meters about 5 years ago, every meter now has 8 different things that it can measure, depending upon what kind of customer you are. But they're all smart. They all are bidirectional. They are all there. They can do amazing things. They can measure, because they're going to time of use. they can now measure how much energy you use during specific periods of time, during specific days of the week. And the same, they can measure how much outflow you have at those same times, so that they can have the proper rate for each of the periods of time throughout the day. It's kind of cool. It's really amazing that they can do all of this. Yeah, it's really amazing.
And I copied down part of your email address, I believe, Rob at Chart House Energy, but I missed what comes after the period. Is it
.com.
net? I'm sorry, com?
.com.
Okay.
And so there's one last thing for those people who don't have a home that will be good for solar. Right now in the House and the Senate are community solar bills, and we will see how it weathers out. But there is a potential for people that have homes that don't work, that in the future will be able to buy into a community system and therefore be able to offset their electric bill sort of virtually, remotely.
Margot.
Is that the state, House and Senate, or the federal?
State. Yep. I don't know the House bill, and yeah, I've already talked to Ed McBroom, the senator from the UP, about the wording on the bill, on the Senate bill, because I wanted him to change a couple of words. But it's exciting. I mean, the opportunity could be really great.
Rob, I have a question. This is Paul Collins. Can you hear?
Yep.
I actually live next door to Jeff.
Oh.
And Jeff knows my house as well as I do. The only sun I get is the sun kind of bouncing off his solar panels, because I'm surrounded on 3 sides by 40 to 60 foot spruce trees and in the back by maples. Do you folks work in anything like wind power or any other alternatives than solar? Because with the age of my house dates back to at least 1886 and the roof's 15 years old. Solar is probably not an option for us.
Right. No.
Okay.
In a word, no, even the guys that do residential scale solar as wind will tell you that it really is an experiment that you might want to throw some money at, but it's not a viable option. You really need to, utility scale wind works because they're at 400 to 500 feet up, and up there you get nice stable wind. And urban environments, even just clearing the trees, it's just not high enough. However, where you guys are at is pretty close to possible because of the beach wind that you get, that constant every evening kind of thing. So I don't recommend it, but if you want to look into it, I can send you to a guy who does it.
Well, Jeff's a politician. My wife's on the city council. There's a lot of wind in my neighborhood anyway.
Yes, they call Chicago the Windy City.
Yeah.
It's because of the politicians, not because of the weather.
This is where Paul asked if you can bury a line from his house over to mine that connect into the solar.
Oh, I don't have to know that, Jeff. I had a shovel already.
Margot, you have another question?
Jim Rose has a good question in the chat about the utility buyback rate and whether that's likely to change. Is net metering going to improve in Michigan?
Oh, great question. I'm an expert witness in Public Service Commission cases, and I'm very excited and encouraged by the present mix of commissioners. They are very customer favored, and I think they are really holding the utilities' feet to the fire, as well as right now, since 1973, there's never been a Democratic governor, Senate, and House, controlled by the Dems. And so it's a rare moment in time where you have a very strong Public Service Commission and a very, and a very sustainable, interested legislature. And so the answer to your question is I think we are at the bottom of the curve right now in the pricing of, or the value of outflow of the excess energy you would be selling. Right now, it is based on the energy portion only of the bill, and all the studies have indicated that it really should offset the energy costs plus some of the transmission or distribution costs, because Jeff's system, when he has any excess, actually powers Paul's house next door. It doesn't really go through the distribution system. It goes to the pole and it comes to your house next door. And so it really makes sense that they should be valuing it. The utility, of course, wants their pound of flesh. They want that 6 or 8 cents a kilowatt hour to supposedly move those electrons around on their wires, even though they really don't even touch those wires. So I expect that in the next year, we're going to see some improvement. The utilities every year hammer away at it, and they want, right now it's at about 11 cents for outflow. They every single year they ask for wholesale price, which is right now 4.5 cents. That is truly the bottom of the barrel, and that is what the utilities want, because then they can price that 4.5 cents power that they've gotten from you and sell it at 19 cents. That's the ultimate win for them. But I see the margin, that 11 to 19 cents. I think we're going to see a closing of the gap. In the old days, we had true net metering where you would get inflow and outflow were the same. That I don't think we're going to get back to. The only state that does really have that, in fact, they have it the other way, is Minnesota. They have a rate that where the solar compensation actually exceeds the price of power by a little bit, because they take into account the environmental impacts that the utilities never take, that never pay for. So long way around, I think that we're going to see a higher outflow rate, and I think it's going to stick around for 5 to 7 years. And I'm sure that at some point we'll have a less favorable commission, and that they'll try to slide back on that rate. So it is not stuck, it is not frozen, and it's not contracted. So this is 100% of that they will never be able to touch behind the meter. So if you generate power and you use it, that will offset full retail rate from here to the end of time. Federal government requires it. I don't see anybody able to change that rule. So that's partly why we'd like to design for as much self-consumption as possible. And if they ever do get a big slide back on rates, you will see adoption of storage big time, because then the economics become very strong to put in storage. Yep.
Don, you have a question?
All the conversation tonight appropriately is about single-family homes. I live in a 28-unit condo building, and that makes life much more difficult for these kinds of discussions. Rob, do you have any perspective about translating all of this into situations where there's homeowner associations or condo buildings, multifamily units?
Yeah, multifamily units are okay. Typically, we've seen, we've done a few projects where you effectively do the common space, so that the association gets a small array to power the heating and lighting in the hallways, and that's about it. And a lot of times, that's about the kind of space they have available. I worked on designing, I didn't actually build it, somebody else did, in Grand Rapids on a multifamily home where they literally put conduits up to the roof from every unit. And so there literally was little teeny, 5 or 10 panels for every unit in the building. And they wired it directly into everyone. So it was just like having it on your roof of your home, except they did it on the building scale. That is really hard to do after the fact. When you're building it, it's totally doable.
Yeah. The other complication is that homeowner associations seem to be deathly afraid of having to repair their roofs, and they're utterly convinced that putting solar panels on will create a problem, which you and I know is not true, but how to convince them of that is.
I totally know. I was in a condo. I was on the board of a condo building in Chicago when I lived there. You don't have to, you're preaching to the choir there. Now, one thing that I just, a little twist is that for multifamily low-income homes, there's a special incentive for those that go up to 70%. So if there's a low-income home project, then the opportunity is to take the whole facility and all of the meters and put one single meter on the whole facility. The problem is then the operator of the building has to bill everybody individually. But because this opportunity of having very low priced electricity and benefiting the low income, they can almost roll it into the rent. And now there's no electric cost. So that's something that I think we're going to see in some volume, whether it be on the roof or on the ground mounts, we'll see. But I'm excited that was written into the federal law.
I was wondering if I could claim my fraction of the roof and put enough solar panels on it to charge my electric vehicle, which I can't do now in the multifamily unit. But
I want to go to that board meeting when you convince them to do that.
I'll videotape it for you.
Okay, please do. I want to see it. Very great.
Rob, how do we set up a home visit? Through you or Peter or Jeff or?
Yeah, send Peter your electric bill. I'll send you a proposal and then we'll set up a visit.
Rob, you already sent us a proposal.
Oh, all right. Well, then give me a call and I'll come and visit with you.
Okay.
Carol, it looked like you wanted to jump in.
Yeah. The whole conversation pains me. I had 5,700 watts on my house 2 houses ago, and really had the setup on that old drafty house where my bill for the year dropped to about $60 for all of my electrical use. And I had an instant on water heater and a high efficiency furnace that were the only things that used gas. So everything else, including my dryer, was electrical. And I was a science teacher. I used those panels in class because they reported out onto the internet. It was a sun power system. And it was about $37,000. But back then, for that 5,700 watts, or I don't know, it was like 14,400 came back from DTE, and I got about 12,000 off on my taxes because I also had replaced my roof at the same time because it desperately needed it. And now I live in a condo downtown in Muskegon, and one of my neighbors is really into this, and he can't figure out, even though he was the president of the condo association, how to get people interested other than me. But that's 2 out of 14, and it's a start. But what I want to do is change the condo rules to make it so that if I start sticking things on my roof, I'm responsible for the roof, and then that's the end of the problem. And well, the roof and any damage. But my last system is now, I don't know, 11 or 12 years old. It's on a lake. There's a ton of wind. There's not been one problem with that roof, not one. And it's a low pitch roof, not a high pitch like I have here. So the biggest problem we had was keeping leaves out from underneath the system. And so I wound up using a leaf blower on it, and then putting screening around the edges of it, which actually dressed it up. It looked really nice. But my question is, because I got that tax credit, am I boxed out from getting another one? Is there a lifetime limit like there is on some of the other?
No, it's just the only limit is that the purchase of a system is that you're buying new equipment.
Okay. And have
And
you
so
seen any kind of rules
every
change?
home you could do another solar system if you'd like.
All right,
You
I
know,
mean,
you could do your cottage or your cabin, or you could
Okay.
do it. It doesn't. You could own multiple homes. It doesn't. There's no limit.
and have you seen condo rules get changed ever? And you said you were on one that didn't seem inclined to do it, but
I think it is possible. I have seen it. I have seen systems installed, and I think that it's. Think the opportunity, if there ever is one, is the economics right now are strong enough to, if you'd like me to go and sit down with the board, your local, it'd be not too painful for me to sit in and explain it to everybody. But in my board, it had to have a 2/3 vote. And that was a really hard thing because 2/3 to spend that money. And if it's done as a PPA, then we might be able to get because it's a no cost item, it may be opportunity to actually make it happen.
the other piece is I just had a transfer switch and a generator set up, put onto the house here, onto my condo. And if anybody was curious, it was about $1,500 to get the interlock, get a sub panel with the 10 breakers in it, and get it so that I could feed into the system from a plug on the outside of the house without electrocuting the line workers, because there's a special little doodad on the main breaker that you can't get the juice to come from the generator without sliding that over, and then the whole house goes back on if you'd like it to. I chose to do less than that. But the point to that is I think that's something that you could do with what Rob was talking about earlier. And if you didn't need that sub panel, the cost would probably be about half of what I did.
Right.
So maybe $750, you'd be in business.
Everyone, we're approaching the half hour here. Are there any questions you still have? Okay, let me say two things in closing then. One, I'm one of those guys who used to do energy audits, going into homes and figuring out ways to make them more energy efficient. And I couldn't more strongly support Rob's premise that first get your energy efficiency up to scale. You know, that the less energy you need in the first place, the smaller the solar system you'll need ultimately. And there are good resources to do that these days. when President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act last August, it contains specific measures and rebates for upgrading your home and the efficiency of your home. There is an organization out there called Rewiring America. So if you Google Rewiring America, they have a calculator that will tell you, based on your information you put in, exactly what credits and rebates are you eligible for and how much money can you expect to save using those resources. So if you're talking heat pumps, heat pump hot water heaters, even heat pump clothes dryers are on that list. There are a number of things that make your house more efficient, and the government is begging you to use that money. So I would encourage you to check out that resource. And then just in closing, thank you so much to Jeff for sharing your experience with solar. You know, as an early adopter, you've made it easier for us to understand what we may be dealing with here. Rob, tremendous information tonight. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and experience. And then just in closing, if you would like to take the next step and at least get an initial estimate to see what a system may cost for you, send us a message here at solarup.net, solarupnet.org, and we will compile a calling list so that Rob will get one efficient list that gives him all of the contacts to follow through on. So that being said, thank you to everyone for being here tonight. So appreciate your interest and you're taking time to research this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.